Well, you saw yesterday the top management at Eskom explaining that they think there won't be load shedding worse than stage 4 during the summer months. They expect a large amount of generation capacity to come back online over the next few weeks and months. In particular, 3 units at the Kusile power station due to come back after the Environmental Affairs Minister Barbara Creasy formally gave permission for Eskom to use those units without what's called flue desulfurization technology. In other words, they're allowed to pump out a huge amount of pollution because their systems that stop the pollution aren't working. Hilton Trollip is an independent analyst in energy systems. He joins us now. Hilton, good afternoon to you. Firstly, the assessment from Eskom that there probably won't be load shedding worse than stage 4. From what you see, is that realistic over the next 5 months, say?
So, one uses estimates using past trends and known actions, and how the known actions will impact the future. Looking at past trends, I looked at the Eskom briefing yesterday, including their presentation, and their slide, both the press release and a slide, and statements by the CEO and the head of generation, all say that there's been a decline in unplanned maintenance. And Stephen, I don't like to be persnickety, but this simply isn't true. I've had a very good look at Eskom's own data. I've had a good look at the slide itself. The slide says there's a declining trend, but there isn't. I could go into the basic arithmetic or talk about it, but so this is, for me, it's untenable that the CEO and a senior executive of a company can make a statement which, if it came out of a large listed company, would lead to the shares hitting the floor. I understand they have to make their bosses happy, but it kind of doesn't do much for confidence in their predictions for the future. But let's go to the predictions for the future on the facts, not on their statement that there's been a decline in unplanned outages. The 3 units from Kusile, according to Eskom, will come online early now that they have been given the go-ahead by the Environmental Minister, Barbara Creasy. So if Eskom, who have, as I say, not exactly been covering themselves in credibility, if they have been accurate in their reports on how well things are going at Kusile, and those 3 units of Kusile come on in October, November, December, they're meant to come on early at the moment, but even if they come on in November and December, we will have about an extra, out of those units, 1.5 gigawatts by my reckoning, nearly 2 by Eskom's reckoning, on the grid, which is 1.5 stages of load shedding. So if you use that, looking at the data, unplanned maintenance stays about the same, and 1.5 gigawatts, that's 1.5 stages of load shedding. Off that, then we'll go down to where we've been with the load shedding, which is highly variable, somewhere between 2 and 6 or 7, depending on how you calculate it, for the foreseeable future, minus 1.5 stages. So I'm saying that that's my estimate until the end of the year. Then if Modipi unit comes on sometime around March next year, I think they're saying, maybe I'm wrong, yeah, March, then that's another half a stage at least. So 2 stages of load shedding by March next year, all other things being equal, and all other things are equal unless we see credible evidence that they're not equal. And so that's what I'm saying. Yeah, who knows? But, we don't take averages on load shedding. It's between 0 and 6. But it'll be, on average, by the end of the year, about 1.5 stages lower, and then by March next year, 2 stages lower. Unless something else happens, and we have to go on past performance unless there's been a substantial change in what's going on. We haven't heard any actual hard evidence or facts about... But let me bring up one particular worrying issue. a condition of the Eskom bailout by the Treasury was that this BCGE group of consultants would present a report by mid this year, which assessed the state of the coal-fired power stations. This is a really, really heavyweight group of international consultants. Apparently, this report has been given to Treasury, but it's kind of where the Lady R report is. Actually, it hasn't even got there. Right. We haven't seen the executive summary. So what's going on? Why can't we see this report? I believe...
Yeah. All right. So, Hilton, there are many factors, as you say. The 3 units at Kusile. Now, each of these units is about 800 megawatts, but they won't come back at full power each. If they came back at full power, that's 2,400, that's 2.5 stages of load shedding. Eskom suggests they come back probably half power or 75%. But they've been off for over a year. So, sure, my car's a nice, reliable car, but I've had to leave it for a year. I don't know what it would be like. I wouldn't take it to 120 straight away.
So that's why I said by my reckoning, 3 of them, 1.5 gigawatts. That's 500 each. By Khalib Kasim's reckoning, he's putting them on, and he's head of generation, they're shoving them on at their rated capacity of 720. So they've just added that all up, and they've said by the 4 units from Kusile, the extra one that's also coming on, not the broken one, but the last one to be commissioned, between those 4, they get 2,880. That's 720 times 4. I'd say 500 times 4 is what I'd be saying if I was an Eskom exec at this stage, and I had the history of the whole power sector and all big projects, and especially theirs, and also that these things broke and that there's lots of other problems. We know their management problems, skills problems, coal delivery problems, spares problems. You don't put up a best-case scenario and expect credibility, and that's what they're doing, as you point out. They're putting them on full rated capacity, bang, straight away, here we go, up to 140 kilometers an hour because it's a fancy whatever, not let's run this thing in and let's see how we go. So yeah, they're not doing themselves or the country or Eskom any kind of favor by this, kind of rash statements. As I say, if they were a listed company, I wouldn't have any shares with them with this kind of executive performance. And of course, that has to bring in this whole issue of the CEO and the DPE ministers taking 3 months to tell them that he didn't like 1 or 2 items about how this person was put up. All of that.
All right, Hilton, there are other things, and one of the consequences of all of what we've been discussing is what will now be a huge amount of pollution, what's sometimes called particulate matter. In other words, very intense smoke that will come through to allow Kusile to operate. So it's got a very fancy chimney stack. At the top of the chimney stack is something that's supposed to clean the smoke. That thing isn't working. This is going to result in what doctors will call more excess deaths. In other words, some people will die earlier in Mpumalanga because of this pollution. I think many people in the country would accept that we need the electricity. If I were living in Mpumalanga, I'd have a very difficult view. It's a very difficult trade-off.
So, Stephen, on that one as well, and I won't only contradict the Eskom CEO, I'll contradict you too. It's actually that the particulates are important, but what is not being done is something called flue gas desulfurization. So South African coal has got a lot of sulfur in it, and when you burn it, it comes up with something called SOXs, SO2, SO3, SO4. These are invisible, toxic gases. And I've said this before on the media. I grew up in Vereniging, and I was rushed to the Vereniging Hospital as a child, and my life was saved because I couldn't breathe. And it was because of the SOXs in the air. I'm allergic to sulfur. There are lots of us. We have asthma, allergic asthma, and we die. The classic death of an asthmatic is to die not being able to breathe. And there have been a whole lot of estimates. They're very difficult. I've seen numbers from a fairly credible organization saying that 600 deaths, and I don't know how many, 30,000 hospital visits, sicknesses, etc. So all the asthmatics that haven't been killed off or chased away already by the air in the Secunda Vaal Triangle area and all the sulfur in it, are going to be subject to these toxic gases. And once again, it's the poor. It's the poor people living in the terribly polluted air of the Secunda and Vaal Triangle area that are going to be subject to this sulfur SOXs, and they're going to suffer and they're going to die. And this is a fact. Right. I mean, it's a future fact, but that's what's going to happen.
Hilton Trollip, thank you very much indeed. Very sober analysis, an independent analyst on energy systems and electricity. Really appreciate the time.